Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the organization?
Thank you, Commissioner Bonilla. It's really nice to be here today. My name is Rachel Allen, and I'm the Executive Director of the Peace and Justice Institute. So, we are a new nonprofit in Central Florida. Having been born and raised up at Valencia College for the last 15 years, we're now an independent nonprofit with a vision: all people, all voices, all matter. So, working for equity and justice and peace in our community for everyone.
Can you share with us the mission and the core principles of the Peace Justice Institute and how it's making a difference in Central Florida?
So, the Peace and Justice Institute aims to create a community that works for everyone. So, the vision, all people, all voices, all matter, really challenges each one of us to become practitioners of peace and justice and learn how to be welcoming and inclusive to everyone. So, we have a set of principles for how we treat each other that kind of teach us and give us practices on a daily basis on how to move toward being a peace and justice practitioner. And then we recognize at PJI that the work begins with each one of us. It's really kind of an inside job. So it's work we can do internally to face biases or anything that keeps me from fully welcoming and accepting you in my life.
What are some of the key initiatives that your organization has been involved in to foster social justice in the region?
Well, in order to achieve these goals, we work across many sectors. And one of the sectors we love to work with, of course, is education. So we have a summer teachers academy, the PJI Teachers Academy. So we work with teachers to help them do some of their own inner work so that they can create classrooms and school environments that are welcoming to all children and to one another as teachers. So there is a positive school community there. We also have our resilience network. So, working with 600 individuals that are now members of this network and over 300 organizations, working to build what we call a trauma informed Central Florida. So, this is recognizing that all of us in our families and our communities experience hardship, trauma. How do we become a community that is responsive to that? So that instead of asking the question, what's wrong with you? Because after trauma, oftentimes there's a behavioral reaction that can seem, kind of off in children and adults. So we move from saying, what's wrong with you or what's wrong with that person, to thinking inside of ourselves, what happened to them? And we turn to wonder, why are they behaving that way, and what's really going on? So we can become helpful and maybe part of the healing process and the restoration. So that's our resilience network. Those are just two of our many programs at PJI.
How does PJI collaborate with other organizations and the community to create a more equitable and inclusive environment?
One way we collaborate is through education, and we educate across many different sectors and groups. So, for example, we work at the City of Orlando, and we work with all their new employees in training to help them think about how are we going to create a more inclusive and welcoming work culture and City of Orlando. So, we do workshops on an ongoing basis at City of Orlando. We work with the City of Sanford. We've worked with nonprofit organizations, government organizations, schools, really to help build this culture among us, a culture of peace and justice, resilience. And in the Resilience Network, there's an extraordinary amount of collaboration because really in a community, to solve for the more challenging problems that we face, homelessness, hunger, violence within the community, it will take all of us. It isn't any one sector group that will help solve these issues. As you, being county commissioner, are well aware of the need for partnership. So at PJI, partnership is primary to our success because, again, to build the culture of peace and justice where all people and all voices matter, we are going to have to work together. We're going to have to get to know each other, and we're going to have to work together.
You were invited to speak at the United Nations and received recognition from local authorities. How do these accomplishments validate and impact your work?
Well, it's amazing to get validation for work that we do out of passion and commitment. So I would say hundreds of people have worked to develop what is now the Peace and Justice Institute and a local nonprofit. So many voices and a diverse group of people. So when we are recognized by the Orange County government or the mayor of Orlando or at the United Nations, I think it fuels us. It's affirmation. And for the United Nations to say there is a credible pathway to the culture of peace, and it's being practiced in Central Florida, and have that featured is remarkable. And for me personally, it helps me to wake up every day with continued passion and energy to continue the work. Because I think in our minds, we might think, well, working for peace. I mean, people laughed at me 15 years ago when this work started. But it's not anything laughable. It's real.
Mhm.
We need it in our schools. We need it in our workplaces, in our homes, and in our community. And really, the best way to get to peace is to educate for peace and justice and to practice. And that's what we're doing at PJI. And what's so thrilling is that hundreds and really thousands of people in Central Florida are doing this together. And that's what makes the work effective.
As a lifelong educator, how do you see education, which you've talked about, playing a vital role in building a culture of peace and justice?
I think it's so important. And when this whole conversation began about 15 years ago, one of the things that we learned is that we've spent millennia, we humans, understanding the art of war and practicing war. And I think we see that around us. We see that even in how we teach history. But we didn't really begin studying the nature of human peace until after World War II, when European think tanks got together and the United Nations put the Declaration of Human Rights together. So, really, this study and practice of peace is relatively new. And while we do have so many problems that we face, climate change and many, many concerns that feel overwhelming, the good news is we are learning to resolve conflict in a new way, practice peace, teach peace to children. And it's happening by teaching emotional intelligence, conflict transformation skills, the ACEs work we're doing in resilience. All of this is a way of educating us to understand that we can work for peace. We can rewire our brains. Now we know about neuroscience and neuroplasticity. So even children that are struggling, we know that we can work with them and we can help create new neural pathways so that their reactions, rather than being maybe violent, can become more peaceful. So the science is working in our favor. The educators at our institutions of higher education are working in our favor, and teachers are now learning this. So peace is possible, and we humans can get there. It's not just pie in the sky idealism. PGI marries pragmatism as well. We're practical. We know it's not easy, but we do believe that with education, each one of us, each resident in Central Florida, has the power to be an agent of social change.
Can you tell our viewers how to learn more and get involved?
Well, we would love for you to get involved in PJI, and one way to do that is to visit our website, peacejusticeinstitute.org, and sign up for the newsletter, because that's when you're going to receive information about workshops, public events, trainings, many, many ways that you can get involved. And of course, you can always attend our annual International Day of Peace celebrations in September. We have film screenings, workshops that are free to the public all year long. So please do sign up for the newsletter and join us.
This is an activity here that we're going to do to learn a little bit more about social justice. It's called a social justice tree. And the roots are going to represent the principles, the trunk is going to symbolize the practices, and the branches are the outcomes or initiatives of social justice. So we'll start off with the principles and the roots.
Well, at PJI, we actually do have our principles for how we treat each other. And so we believe these are things that can move us toward justice. And one of them is honesty, learning to tell the truth. And we have the principle of listening deeply. And we have a principle of turning to wonder so that when things get difficult and we might start to judge other people, we turn to wonder. We have a principle of suspend judgment. So we see something and we think, well, that's wrong. We might say, well, I wonder why they're doing that. It's so different. So the idea of asking a good question, an open and honest question. So these are some of the principles that we work with at PJI. And in fact, in our list, we call our principles for how we treat each other. There are 13 of them. And I'm thinking one of them I think that we need to just say is speak your truth. So the foundations of social justice are listening to each other and listening to truths, because our lived experiences are very different. And so if we want to learn to understand each other and get to justice, we've got to listen, suspend judgment, and turn to wonder. And I think the risk of telling the truth is a big one, because it's not always easy to tell the truth about what's going on or how we feel.
Mm-hmm. And then the trunk symbolizes the practices.
So at PJI, I would say the practices, and one thing we always have in the center of our tree is a heart. And the heart really represents the individual. We might even use the word soul. It's the depth of who we are. So the practices move us to explore who am I, and that's the first work. So knowing myself. And I do that, well, at PGI, we do it by attending workshops and learning different aspects of our identity. So understanding that as a white woman who grew up here in Central Florida, and I have a biracial family, my children are mixed race, I speak Spanish, yo hablo español, y me encanta el jardín, I love the garden, I love the animals. This is who am I? But that knowing who I am will also inform maybe what are some of my biases. I mean, in order to grow personally to a place where I fell in love in a mixed race marriage and I was open, I had to face some of my own internalized racism, because I grew up here in Florida in a very divided community where there were actually railroad tracks down the center of town. And white people lived on one side and black people lived on the other. So these were some of the things that, in order to really get it to who am I and to get to a place where I can be loving of all people, the practices are facing bias, learning how to handle conflict, because maybe I'm a person that screams and yells when I get angry or fights, or maybe I'm a person that walks away and gets silent. I've got to have some practices to, when I get to a tough spot in my life, how can I navigate that conflict? How can I face my bias? How can I face issues of identity? So this is the heart, because the goal is to get to this, right?
That's great.
And so
This is the outcomes or initiatives of social justice.
yeah, the outcomes. And I love it's green, right? Because it's filled with life. Because what happens when we practice these principles and we face these things about ourselves is that we start to have stronger relationships. I think we get more curious, like, oh, I really want to know Commissioner Bonilla, more about who she is and her culture. And maybe we're different, but maybe we're so similar. And so what happened, the flourishing is that we have stronger relationships. We have stronger community. We are able to problem solve. And we have more peace in the community, because instead of, maybe we recognize that I'm dealing with conflict in a negative way. Maybe I'm creating more conflict, right? What if I learn to deal with that? Well, then I can be a person who knows how to bring peace. I can be a person because I know how to speak my truth and I know how to be honest and listen. I could be a person that helps build justice in the community. And I could be a person with how I am, even when I walk in the room, because the resilience work teaches us that our energy that we bring when we walk in the room, it can impact the whole room. So if we come in with angry energy or negative energy, we could impact the whole room. So I could grow myself. I'm going to make this green too, right? Because I've grown. I could grow myself to a place where there's more peace around me, there's more calm, there's more compassion and empathy. And when I do that, I have more flourishing relationships. I become a problem solver instead of an agent of problems, right? I bring peace in the room with me. I'm willing to work for justice because I know I'm not going to hurt people along the way. I'm going to do it in a peaceful manner. I have personal resilience and I strengthen others because of how I am and who I am. And I become an agent of building a stronger community, a community that works for everyone. So this is how it works. And this is what we're doing at PJI. And I'm so happy to be able to talk to you about it today.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this. This was a really great visual, and I love how you explained it. And yeah, it's really neat. And I hope that the viewers can understand social justice a little bit more. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying this show, please subscribe to our channel and follow our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter accounts.